I'll be honest, I had almost given up on modern gaming. It's hard to find a game these days where it feels like some corner wasn't cut because they ran out of time or resources, or some system wasn't compromised because the publisher decided that it was more important to nickel and dime the player base. And it's not because people are getting worse at making games or because they don't know what's fun anymore, but because games have evolved into overwhelming monstrosities that cost so much to develop. They cost time, they cost money, they cost human sacrifice. And the scope of these things and that cost is only increasing as technology improves. For games to even exist as capital enterprises as well as art, they often have to pick between these things to get them made. And it seems like more often than not, I come away from these experiences feeling disappointed that the depth that I was looking for wasn't there. Even an old series that I've loved for years. All because not enough people would appreciate it for it to be worth ballooning the scope of a project for. And that's not to say the good games aren't being made at all anymore. Certainly, I'm part of this problem that I'm describing, because I already tried very few new games a year when I was younger, and now that I'm older, I try even fewer of them. A game has to be really exceptional for me to choose to sit still and give it undivided attention, when there's a personal cost to sitting still. Ah, my aching back! I've always been the type of player that gets really into a select few games that meet my idiosyncratic tastes, and plays them at the exclusion of everything else. It had just been a really long time before that magical game had come along. That was everything I was looking for and didn't feel like a compromise. It didn't feel like a shallower version of something else, but instead became an all-consuming obsession for me. It had probably been, honestly, at least 10 years since I felt this way about anything new. I thought maybe it was just part of growing up, that games just couldn't be that for me anymore, and that I had reached that inevitable stage of life where I'm that old person that only consumes old media and is otherwise completely out of touch. And then Baldur's Gate 3 happened. I truly do not understand how this happened. I don't know how these hundreds of people came together to make a game in this day and age that doesn't cut any corners, that isn't a games as service model, that somehow gains commercial success, while also being one of the most detailed and thorough experiences I have ever played. This game brought me back. It put the controller back in my hands. And it not only reminded me what I love about games, but it did everything I could have asked for and more. It's like a dream game crafted out of my own personal fantasies just for me. I don't know how to begin to convey how wonderfully completely this game emphasizes the impact of your choices on the outcome of the story. This is what I've always wished video game RPGs could be, but I never thought it was actually possible to account for the broad spectrum of human women problem solving. The closest thing I've ever played is Fallout New Vegas, and even that game pales in comparison. I'm brand new to the Baldur's Gate franchise. I haven't played any of them except this one. I really didn't know anything about it going in, and actually I don't even really know that much about D&D, despite having played a couple campaigns with my friends. Call me selfish, call me weird, but I've always preferred solo roleplay through video games. It's much easier for me to inhabit a character and make decisions as they would without compromising their identity when there aren't the social conventions of taking other players' wants into account. A real tabletop session of D&D is great and fulfilling for other reasons, but I can't play a bard that wants to solve every problem as peacefully as possible with a friend that wants to be a barbarian who flies into a rage and starts smashing things at the slightest inconvenience. Not without someone having to give up something that they want. When you play with other people, you respect what makes the game fun for them, while also trying to have a good time, giving up some things that you might want to do for the good of the group. This is obviously still fun, but it's not as expressive an experience in exchange. RPing solo often involves a different kind of compromise, one against what the systems allow for or what the story was written to accomplish, with little flexibility built in for the choices you make. Of every video game I have played in my life, this is the one that provides the most complete solo RPG video game experience, with the fewest possible restrictions on expression of the character. Baldur's Gate systems, it turns out, are a video game adaptation of the systems found in D&D. Not one-to-one, but the same parties, classes, feats, and so on are present, just tweaked to fit a medium that allows for marginally less spontaneity and to be satisfying according to the balance and difficulty of the game. So we have here a role-playing video game with a direct tie to the classic tabletop role-playing that was a genre's predecessor, one that prioritizes systems that allow you to make character choices through actions in and out of combat, to build both strengths and weaknesses to play around into the identity you craft, and to use creativity to cover what your character lacks. This is often the backbone of a great RPG, as my other favorite RPG, Fallout New Vegas, developed by Obsidian, was inspired by the GURPS system rather than D&D. Modern Bethesda games like Skyrim and Fallout 4, as much as I have a love-hate relationship with those, have always frustrated me in that your characters in those games can only continue to get better at everything, and can't really be bad at anything. Inconveniences like being an idiot who's awkward in dialogue, or not being able to take a hit and needing to avoid combat, is part of what defines them as individuals, and without those, you're missing a good chunk of your ability to define their personality, physicality, and capability. It is so refreshing to be able to make decisions that don't revolve around combat and optimizing damage output above all else. It's wonderful to choose to be a bard and just start rocking out in the middle of a battlefield for no reason other than it's what your character would do. Or to choose to not be a bard and interrupt a jam session by not being able to play your equipped instrument. It's wonderful to have so very many toys and options to play with to solve the problems you come up against, or to create new ones on accident, in multiple distinct difficulties no less. And I haven't even tried the multiplayer co-op modes yet. Where the systems and gameplay is so finely crafted for role-playing, you might expect the game to lack in some other area, like perhaps the writing, or the performances, or the visuals. But nope, they're all good. They're all the best. Okay, maybe I actually shouldn't comment on the visuals. I played on a Steamdeck at the lowest settings, which is why all the footage in this video was recorded by Vidit instead of me. But once again, I was floored by the care taken to portray not only one thoughtfully written, fleshed out narrative, but so many different permutations and possible versions of it. I can't stress to you enough how rare it is to find a video game RPG where the game by design allows you to thoroughly, from start to finish, change the narrative of the game itself. There are 17,000 different possible endings to this game. There are bespoke, voice-acted, pre-planned lines of dialogue for extremely niche solutions to quests. Minor early game spoiler, but I played as a ranger, and had spoken to Halsin using Speak with Animals before freeing him from the goblin camp while he was still in his bear form. His dialogue acknowledged that, even though it didn't actually impact the outcome of the quest itself and not every player would ever hear it.
Not only do you speak with a bear, but you free it too? A true friend of nature. Or perhaps a lunatic.
I'm in awe of this game and what the people who worked on it were able to accomplish here. What makes the story so effective despite the different iterations and variables that can be impacted by your choices is that it revolves mostly around your party members and their relationships with you and their own personal struggles and triumphs, or depending on the choices you make, tragedies. I came to love all the characters in this game as if they were dear friends I had known my whole life. As if Faerun was a real place I had really been, and explored and adventured with them all. Each character, even though the trappings may be fantastical, has a very real emotional core to their being. A common theme that they all share is trauma, and how they experience life afterward and process it. Not necessarily how they overcome it. All of them have some sort of wedge driven between them and other people in their past, whether it be slavery, religion, or the burden of their duties. And their storylines can all have dramatically different outcomes depending on the choices you make, and your relationships with not just them, but other characters in the world. And you might think, wow, that sounds super heavy and melodramatic. That's not for me. But the dialogue is so clever and well written that in spite of the deep sadness and anger, loss like these characters have experienced might bring, the people going through these things are often also a joy to spend time with.
The pleasant scent gives way to the muddy taste of something you try not to identify. You carefully slide the ring off.
You enjoying that? Disgusting worm. Just remember, you're nothing here.
Impressive. Though I'm not sure I want to know why you're so skilled at that.
No. I want to hear every sordid detail.
As often as I was moved to tears, I laughed at genuinely funny moments, and it's all thanks to the performances of the actors and the quality of the writing. Granted, this can be a bit of a double-edged sword at times. I got very invested in the stories of my party members after spending 120 hours with them, but the systems of D&D are still built on dice rolls and proficiencies that you can fail even while playing a character who is supposedly specialized in them. I can't tell you how heartbreaking it was to get to the end of Astarian's questline after learning to love him and want the best for him, and fail one persuasion check while being proficient in persuasion after spending all of my inspiration, resulting in the worst possible ending for him and for me. I had nightmares about it afterwards. I tried not to save scum in my playthrough as much as I could, but it got very difficult towards the end of the game after investing so much time with these people to let them down like that. Needless to say, I did reload and try again. I'm not made of stone. But it still haunted me seeing it play out that way. One of the areas I've always struggled with in games like this is that it's hard to find a motivation for a character who might take a route other than altruistic good person and still move through the main story. Someone who's driven by selfish things might not naturally care about other people enough to participate in a storyline that's ultimately about saving the world. Incredibly, this game solves even that problem with the Dark Urge character. Without taking away any of your ability to craft who this person is, the Dark Urge provides a backstory with alternate motivations, so you can test out different allegiances, make different decisions, and still do so with a compelling motivation to do all these things, without overriding whoever you want that person to be. It makes repeated playthroughs even more fun. It's not often that I talk about a game that I'm not a complete expert in, and I very rarely if ever talk about games that have just come out. So my apologies if this wasn't what you expected from me. I am not an expert in this franchise, not an expert in this set of systems, and I'm not an expert in modern gaming. Sometimes that expectation to always know everything that I'm talking about can be a little stifling, to be honest. But I do have a deep love for RPGs, and I thought it was worth telling you about a game that genuinely moved me the way this game did. Maybe as I keep playing, and I intend to now that I've finished a run, I may become more of an expert in the future and may be able to elaborate on some of these topics. But for now, let this video stand as a time capsule of what I feel and think after finishing my very first playthrough. I'd give anything to go back and experience some of my favorite games for the first time again. I know that this game is not on the Switch, which is the system that most of the games that I talk about are on. So unfortunately, not everyone in my audience will be able to give it a try, but if you have the means to, it's definitely worth falling in love with. Today's show and tell item from my collection, while I ask you all to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications, is these cool dice I got for Christmas from my best friend Jana. They have little tiny error windows in them. They're absolutely perfect for the many times I can't seem to roll higher than a 4.